Steve, did you say something? I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Oh, no, okay. But now Irenaeus, he's tied with Irenaeus.
And Irenaeus is, from my perspective, is kind of like this. Ignatius' epistles, they have good theological content. They are very occasional. They're being written precisely for the occasion in which they're written. He's trying to edify and encourage his communities.
Mm-hmm.
Irenaeus is up against, in terms of the life of the mind, Irenaeus is up against a really comprehensive, and here I'm going to use he's kind of a charitable use of the term heretic earlier, but I think you can give it a less charitable term. And especially I think over time, as people become hardened in their wickedness too, et cetera, et cetera, I think you can become less charitable over time. And, you start to encounter the Gnostic heresies of the mid to late second century, and these things are genuinely bizarre. They're bizarre for us. They're bizarre for Irenaeus. And he spends the first 2 books of it versus heresies refuting them by explaining them. He says at one point, all you have to do is exposit their system to prove that they're wrong. All you have to do is actually see what they believe for themselves. It was like a number of, I don't want to, my job here isn't to bash the Church of Scientology, but as the internet has exploded, a lot of the sort of the deeper levels of the Scientology sort of mythos has come online, and you read this stuff and you're just like, Zeno and the Galactic space, what? And it's almost self-refuting at that point for the vast majority of people. Well, that's kind of how it is with the Gnostics too. The more you penetrate into their secret doctrine. Well, in any event, though, there really are comprehensive systems that offer a completely alternative worldview to Catholicism, one that ultimately leaves behind the body, the resurrection of the body, that conceives of Christ as some kind of apparition or whatever particular form it takes, so that we can kind of escape this world and go back to the spiritual father of Jesus Christ, which is different from the God of the Jews, who is also the creator of the world. They're a completely comprehensive worldview in that respect. And to respond to a comprehensive worldview, Irenaeus has to respond comprehensively. And he begins to really think through our first, quote unquote, theology of history, trying to think about how the succession of the covenants hold together. When you deal with the Marcionites in the mid-second centuries, they want to divide the God of the Old Testament, the creator, from the God of Jesus Christ. And in doing that, they start to rip up the scriptures as well. Well, how do we hold the Old Testament and the New Testament together? Oh, this is the beginning of the formation of the Christian canon, where we really begin to think about how the Old Testament scriptures relate to the New Testament scriptures. And then you have that tension between old and new, which characterizes the New Testament. How does the law of Moses relate to the gospel of Jesus Christ? Irenaeus is beginning to work through all of these issues that are fundamental to Catholicism.
Right. And well said. And for our listeners too, to give thought. I mean, we just presume this, but the fact that the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament, is inspired. It's inspired word of God. It's part of our canon. Is an important fact it's an important fact of faith that there was a time when there wasn't unanimity about that. To your point, right? So Marcion and all the gang would have said, no, it's a radical break. But let's go back to Gnosticism. It seems to me that Irenaeus is extraordinarily relevant, in part because Gnosticism is not totally dead.
It is not dead.
It's alive in the 21st century. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Now, there's different permutations, different concerns, but it's still very much alive today, I think, in a couple of variant forms.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us one example?
So to wade into the cultural war issues, I think you see aspects of this in some of today's transgender disputes. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings, but I think that there's complex sort of spiritual issues going on here. And when somebody says, for example, that my true self doesn't match my body, that sounds very much like the Gnostic sort of anthropologies that Irenaeus is describing. It has its own particular sort of sexual twist that's being put on it nowadays. Nevertheless, that severance between kind of your true self, the spark of light within you, et cetera, and then what's been formed by the creator, and then there's also is the person that infused our soul the same as the person that infused our body? Well, there's really complex issues here that split in different directions.
Yeah, the way we've talked about it in the past with Steve and some of our other guests is that Gnosticism de-emphasizes and devalues the material world, right? And there is the spiritual world of which there's a secret knowledge, and if you have it, you're on your way. And there's a radical unity in the incarnation, right, between the material world and the spiritual world. And precisely because God made it to be good, sin has marred it, but not destroyed it. Christ has come to recreate it, which is a theme in the Fathers as well. But so he was he was the first to systematize the theology, one could say. Is that fair? Irenaeus?
I think that's reasonably fair. It's not that there isn't elements of that maybe in Justin Martyr or, and St. Paul clearly has like some sort of comprehensive framework in mind behind his epistles.
Right.
Just as, but like, Augustine is a kind of systematic theologian, but he's also still very much an occasional theologian that's addressing particular contexts. And then you have to kind of piece together what he has a thought behind him.
Mm-hmm.
You probably encounter this with Cyril too. He's attacking a particular situation. He has a comprehensive thought system behind this. But he just gives you little bits of it here and there, and you have to try and bring it back together.
Right.
Irenaeus is the person, I think, that early on gives you the fullest sort of like exposition of kind of a complete worldview.
Thanks for watching. Before you go, please be sure to subscribe, like, hit the bell, leave a comment down below. All of that stuff helps us reach more souls.